This is the IBJ Podcast for the week of April 15th, 2025, brought to you by Taft. I'm IBJ Editor Lesley Weidenbener, in This Week for Mason King. This week we're doing something a little different. We're bringing you a conversation I had last week with Maureen Weber on the stage at the 2025 40 Under 40 Awards. Maureen is IBJ's 40 Under 40 alumni winner this year. She was an honoree originally in 2010. Back then, she had just finished reorganizing the Indiana Department of Education and had taken a job as Director of Community Outreach and Engagement at Clarian Health, now Indiana University Health. She was 35, an attorney, and had served in 3 state agencies. She told IBJ then that she had, quote, a penchant for public service and was looking for ways to flex the muscles she built in law school in a way that allowed her to serve the community. 16 years later, Maureen is still impacting the community and public service, now as president and CEO of Early Learning Indiana. She said she took the job because she saw the opportunity to transform the lives of young children, especially vulnerable ones. The organization focuses on helping children learn in their earliest years by operating early learning centers, helping families find quality childcare, and improving the quality of childcare across the state, as well as advocating for greater access to early educational opportunities for all Indiana families. I talked with Maureen on stage about the work Early Learning Indiana is doing today, including the Early Years Initiative, which has received $60 million from the Lilly Endowment to help organizations meet the developmental needs of infants and toddlers. And we talked about leadership and learning from failure. Here's our conversation. Welcome. So happy that you're here today. Maureen, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and congratulations to this amazing class.
I have to tell you, I looked back at your profile from 2010, and you look exactly the same. What we really should be
The guy who
asking
does
is
my
your
hair will be
secrets.
really grateful you think so.
Well, I want to jump right in with some of the things that you're working on right now. The Early Learning Initiative is one of the programs that has had your organization in the news. You received $60 million, as Nate said. Tell us about that program and what it does.
Yeah, the Early Years Initiative really is focused on the uniquely consequential importance of the first 1,000 or so years of life, years or days of life, not years. Years, sometimes it feels like it, but truly it's days. And so we know that the time between birth and 3 years old, when children are infants and toddlers, their brains are undergoing a really fundamental wiring. And that if we get that architecture right, we can pay dividends from that for an entire lifetime. And if we get it wrong, we pay for that too in a different way. And so the Early Years Initiative was really focused on helping community organizations all across the state address the needs of our youngest Hoosiers.
How is that money distributed, and
Sure.
What are those local organizations doing?
Yeah, so we had a couple of rounds, and across those 2 rounds, we funded about 150, a little bit more than that, projects in almost all of our 92 counties. And organizations are using the funding to focus in 4 main areas: to expand access to childcare for infants and toddlers. If anyone has tried to find a seat for an infant, you know how challenging that is. I see some nods up front. It is used to support efforts to strengthen families through home visiting and other activities like that, to address the opportunity to intervene early if we see signs of a disability or some developmental delay, and then lastly, and extremely importantly, to make sure that our child care providers and other organizations across the state understand the critical role they play in developing early literacy skills.
It sounds like you're giving local organizations, local communities an opportunity to figure out the best solutions locally.
That's exactly right. We provided some national models as sort of fodder for their thinking, but really invited local communities to come to us with their needs and to create programs that were responsive for the very young children in their community.
In Indiana, we've had a lot of discussion about kindergarten, a lot of discussion about pre-K. Tell us a little bit more about why this birth to 3-year period is so important.
Yeah, it really is critical in and of itself. We talk a lot about preschool. The fact of the matter is there is so much learning that happens long before a child gets to kindergarten and even before the age of 3. And I'll take you to my backyard to explain what we think the opportunity here is. In my backyard, I have the most beautiful flourishing green plants. They are bushy. They usually really leaf out lovely. And that is wonderful as long as you don't know that those plants are supposed to be hydrangeas. And I have not figured out, I don't know, you cut on the old bloom, the new wood, I'm not sure. I don't know what kind of variety I have, and I can't care for them correctly. So I never get blooms. And that's kind of how we think about the work that we're doing in early childhood, right? We're very concerned about the fact that we have a lot of children who are walking around in our midst who, right, they've learned to walk, they've learned to eat, but we're not seeing their blooms. And we don't know, in this case, would those blooms make them, discover something amazing in medicine? Would it, turn them into a great lawyer? It's impossible to know what we're missing in our community, in our state, if we don't have those blooms. And so the years between birth and 3 years old really are focused on getting that brain architecture, that foundation set in such a way that we can, sort of set that child up for all the learning that will come after in K-12.
Do you think policymakers in Indiana at the local level, at the federal level, are paying enough attention to this area? And what could they be doing that might help?
Yeah, great question. We benefit and we suffer because ours is a solution to a 2-generational problem. We both make it possible for parents, like all of us here in this room, to go to work and do that confident, knowing that our children are safe and cared for and thriving. But at the same time, we have the children for 8, 10, 12 hours a day in this very critical moment of their life. And so I think where we do a pretty reasonable job, at least post-pandemic, is in thinking about that workforce impact right now. I think where we have more work to go from a policy standpoint is in thinking about what we need to do to ensure that we're getting the most out of the generation 20 years from now. And for that, we really have to be extremely focused on the quality of care that we're providing. And I think where we are using our public dollars, we could do that in a much stronger way to ensure that we're incentivizing the types of activities within our early care and education community that will produce those results.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Welcome back to the IBJ Podcast. I'm editor Lesley Weidenbener. This week, we're listening to a conversation I had with Maureen Weber, the CEO of Early Learning Indiana and IBJ's 40 Under 40 Alumni Award winner. So Maureen, when you were a 40 Under 40, you had just finished some work at the Department of Education.
Yes.
You were working at Clarian Health, IU Health now. Did you think that this might be where you would end up?
I think it's safe to say at any moment in my career I have not known what was next, and I've been really comfortable with that. I will say shortly after that, as I was working with Clarian, I had the opportunity to have dinner with a university president, and he looked at my resume and he said, "Oh, it's a classic executive resume." And I thought to myself, I had absolutely no idea that's what I was building, right? I was just doing interesting work as it was presented to me and trying to do the best that I can. And so I would say in the 15 years intervening, that's still been the case.
You talked to me a little bit previously about how you felt like you just watched for doors to open and walked through them. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think sometimes when you're younger, you feel like you have to have your career planned out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me and for my fabulous team and the people I've had a chance to work with over time, It really has been about saying yes to the opportunities presented, or maybe seeing the opportunities that other people didn't. Before I worked at the Department of Ed, I worked for the Indiana Bureau of Motor Vehicles. I can tell you, I'd welcome anybody in the audience who had a childhood dream of that. And yet, it was an opportunity to, help lead a team of 2,000 individuals who at that time were, really demoralized and needed some lifting up. It was an opportunity to better serve Hoosiers in a way that every single one of us will interact with our state government. And to think about the art of possible in a really broken environment. And so, I think I couldn't have planned for the BMV. You probably can't plan for what's ahead for you. But if you focus on giving everything you have to whatever the thing is that you're doing, I think you can have a great deal of confidence that people will see that and the career will follow.
And I believe at the BMV you met some of the people who then went on to give you other opportunities. Am I remembering that right?
That's exactly right. Even before the BMV, I worked at the Department of Workforce Development for Ron Stiver, who's now at IU Health, who I had the opportunity to work for at the BMV and then several times since. And those people that you pick up along the way are real treasures.
What do you look for? I mean, you're in a leadership position now, but as you were moving up and you met someone like Ron Stiver, what are you looking for in a boss that makes you think this person could help me grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in Ron's case, it was a couple of things. First of all, he always took me to the meetings. Someone described recently what was great about the Daniels administration, which feels like a long time ago now, but and the answer was, well, we all got thrown into the deep end of the pool, and we were invited to places we probably had no business going, and having conversations we probably had no business having. And we figured it out. And Ron is someone, and I think, as you're thinking about what's a boss, someone who will be a mentor, someone who will be helpful to you, always made sure that my seat was right up at the table, whether it was with the IU Health, board or in the governor's office. And so you sort of can't trade off that. The other thing I will say is, and when I try to do this for my team too, some of them are here, so they'll either chuckle or we'll see what they think. But I think you want a boss who's always interested in what's the next interesting challenge for you. Your work today is only as interesting as your work today is. And I think oftentimes, young people especially, think they have to leave, go find a new employment somewhere else, get that next title to be able to solve a different challenge. And I think the best bosses create those opportunities right where you are in place.
So you'll notice that I'm asking Maureen about some things that we have previously talked about. And in the publication that you'll get on your way out, we have a Q&A with Maureen and where she talks about a few of these things. One of the things that you mentioned was that you believed that as you moved along in your career that there would be right and wrong choices. Tell me what you meant by that and how you learned that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think coming out of law school especially, I was really concerned that, it mattered deeply what choice I made. Did I stay in Washington, D.C. where I'd been to law school, or did I, move home? And certainly there were implications from every choice that I made. But truly, every decision just opens up a new series of decisions. And so as I aged, I grew to understand that, and I think it kind of takes the pressure off. In part because you'll make the most of wherever you are, and in part because if you make a choice that turned out not to be the right one, you can call audibles.
Have you made any mistakes or had any failures in your career that you look back on now that you feel like you really grew from?
I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with 500 of my closest friends, Leslie, so thank you for that. I will say I had a big one, and this is early in my career. When I started at the Department of Workforce Development, we had a challenge in our unemployment insurance program, which I ran, and we needed to do some things to reduce our costs, and so we consolidated pretty quickly our team there. That was absolutely the right decision. What I did not know is that the timing that brand new me in my role chose for that consolidation was literally June 30th of 2005, What you can't possibly know is that every year on July 4th, the entire RV industry in Elkhart shuts down. And for those 2 weeks, all of those individuals file for unemployment insurance. And so I had literally picked the worst possible day to make this disruption in our world. And so I had almost all of the facts in making this decision. But I didn't quite understand everything that I needed to. And so my lesson learned there is to really take the time to understand whatever the problem is, just as deeply as I can, and so I can sort of make decisions with as much confidence as I can. There's always risk in choosing a direction as a leader, but it pays to do your homework.
When you make a mistake like that, how do you jump, or how do you restart from that? What is it that you tell yourself to feel better about moving forward?
Yeah, well, luckily the mall was still open downtown at that time, so I had some girlfriends who took me to a Clinique counter to help me get myself right. But then after that, what we did was double down and think about what was the problem we were initially trying to solve. And by focusing on that, we created a set of sort of administrative protocols that were much better than what we had, and we did save the dollars that we set out to save in the beginning. And so I think it is about sort of pushing through whatever the it is, and we all have them, and remembering what it was you were trying to do in the first place.
What other advice do you have for this room full of leaders about their futures and their careers?
Well, it's hard because they've all arrived, right? They've all had great successes in their lives, and I'm grateful for the opportunity just to get to know them. But, I'd point to three things. First of all, and it goes back to Ron and Nate and so many others, George Washington said, associate yourself with men of good quality if you esteem your own reputation. And I think it's just incredibly true. The people you choose to hang out with, that you have on your team, that you are part of a team with, are critical to the career that you'll have, probably the single most important factor. The second thing I was thinking about for all of you is, as I think about my career, stay in love with the problem and not some particular solution. If you stay in love with a solution, then you can get kind of backed into a corner, and the world around you will change, and you're sort of stuck. But if you're in love with the problem, if what I'm focused on is how do we make sure that all children across Indiana have what they need to thrive in kindergarten, then that means our work can look different every week, every month, and we hope that it does.
Or in every county.
It's exactly right, and in every county, and it does. And then the last thing I'll say is, I really believe that it's a continual process for all of us as professionals to consider what is the highest and best use of our time and talents. And that's not to say always chase the next title, the next job. But in your role right now, wherever you are, Yuval Levin gave this great talk at BYU a couple of weeks ago. And he said the critical question that no one's asking right now, but that we should all be asking is, given my role here, how should I behave? And I just think if you think about that in terms of your career, you will take the next brave step and do the thing that is sort of advances the ball in whatever it is that you do, which will pay dividends over time.
Maureen, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And we do have this additional award for you here.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Congratulations again to Maureen. You can read more about her in this week's IBJ, which features our 40 Under 40 publication. And you can see the inspiring class of 2025, which includes leaders working in law, government, the private sector, nonprofits, education, and more. You can also read their profiles at IBJ.com. Also in this week's issue, IBJ's Mickey Shuey reviews how Caitlin Clark and other all-star players who have joined the Indiana Fever have driven up the demand for tickets and ticket prices. He talked with both longtime season ticket holders and new ones about their experiences. Plus, Susan Orr writes about what changes at the FDA mean for the companies that rely on its regulation. And reporter Daniel Bradley reviews the Central Indiana projects that are about to get underway thanks to state Ready Grant funding. You can read these stories and more in the latest issue of IBJ and find them at IBJ.com. But you need to be a subscriber to access all of IBJ's business news and industry data. Right now, we're running a promotion that gives you complete access to IBJ and Inside Indiana Business for $1 a week for 8 weeks. Just go to IBJ.com and hit the subscribe button. You can also learn more about IBJ events by going to IBJ.com/events. We have 2 newsroom events coming up soon. The Life Sciences Power Breakfast is April 24th. Our keynote speaker is Indiana Commerce Secretary David Adams, and we have a panel of life science experts who will discuss how Indiana can transform innovation into economic growth. Then on May 8th, IBJ will reveal our Fast 25 list of fastest growing companies. We're also accepting nominations for 2 upcoming awards programs. Our new Nonprofit Excellence Awards, which will honor outstanding nonprofits and foundations, and also the people, partners, and programs that make them special. And we're accepting nominations for 20 in their 20s, which recognizes the region's youngest leaders. Go to IBJ.com/nominations for all the details. Thanks for listening to the IBJ Podcast. Host Mason King will be back next week.